Hi everyone, Richard Carlton here. This video is the result of a number of emails that I've received from people asking me how to take a module within FM Starting Point and how to duplicate that for another purpose. One of the most common requests that I hear is that I'd love to take the estimates module and turn it into a purchase order module. So when we talk about a module in FM Starting Point, we're talking generically about a screen of information that may be comprised of one or more tables. And so in the estimates screen or the estimates module, that's actually comprised of both an estimates table and the estimates line items table. So the term module is somewhat a loose term, not even really an official term within the database community. But the term module makes sense to a number of people, so we're going to use this for the time being. Now keep in mind that this video will be great for beginning and intermediate FileMaker developers. If you're a power user and you've been using FileMaker for a while, but you're not really an expert, then this video may be a good fit for you as well. Now I'm going to expect that you understand the basic idea of what a table is, what fields are, what relationships are. These are all things that I'm going to assume that you already kind of know about FileMaker. Now it's important to note that during this video, I'm going to reference other training videos to provide some additional background knowledge. So once again, we're talking about duplicating a module in FM Starting Point. Now the first thing I want to do is point out that we can go to the FM Starting Point website and download a fresh copy of FM Starting Point. Also note that there are versions for both North American English, which has the currency set for dollars, and addresses and phone numbers set for North America. There's also a UK English version, which has been set up for use of pounds, value-added tax, and phone numbers and addresses that are specific to the UK. So off we go. We're going to go ahead and click on this. I'm going to click on the download and get this show rolling here. So let's talk about what we're doing in this video. The goal in this video is to take a module in FM Starting Point and recycle it for another purpose. Now, we all know that we can go into, say, projects and retitle this and call this jobs, for example. That's very doable. But what is harder to do is actually say, well, I've got this thing called estimates, right? So we have estimates over here, or I can navigate to it up here. These are estimates. What I want to do is I need a system that works like estimates, but it's actually POs that we issue. Now, what's important to understand in the course of this conversation is that there are POs that a company can issue out to vendors. There's also POs that are received as part of your purchase process. So there's really outbound POs and inbound POs. And mechanically within the database, their needs are very similar in a lot of ways, but they are different in terms of business processes. So let's say for the point of this conversation that we're downloaded Starting Point. We think Starting Point's great. We tell all our friends about it because we think that whoever built this solution is just amazing. And then realize that it's missing something and we really don't want to hire a consultant to do it. We could, and they would do it for us, no problem. But what if we want to do it ourselves? And what I want to do is take the estimates module, leave the estimates module, but I need something just like it and make a PO issuing functionality. So this is going to be where we create our own POs out. It's important to understand that most developers and most users will build the layout or start to build the layout that they want first. Then they start to add the tables and the fields to support that as they go on. Since we're duplicating an existing module, we're actually going to build things what you would consider intuitively backwards. We're going to go ahead and we're going to duplicate all the under the hood stuff that makes the estimates work. From the table to the fields to the table occurrences. And then one of the last things we do is work on the layout. So I know this seems counterintuitive, but it's the most efficient way of duplicating a module in FileMaker. So how do we do this? Well, fundamentally at the structural level, I'm going to start using keyboard shortcuts here, but I'm going to do this once. So you can see this. I'm going to go to File, Manage, Database right here. And I'm going to make this a little bigger so we can see this. I'm going to click tables here at the top. So these are all the tables that are part of the base delivery of FM Starting Point. And what I would notice is that we have estimates right here and estimate line items, these two right here. So I understand that these two need to be basically duplicated, and that's the basis of what we're planning to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to estimates and estimate line items. In fact, I can make these a little bit bigger here so you can see them. I'm going to specify copy. Then I'm going to click down here out of the way, and I'm going to say paste. Now the first thing I'm going to do is notice that it put it back in there and it put them with the same names, but FileMaker put the Roman numeral 2 behind it. It's no big deal. This is where we rename them. Now, our naming convention in this product is basically we have a 3-letter acronym for the module. So EST is estimates. So I'll change it to POG for PO generation, right? And then I'll call it POs generated or issued. You could change it to issued as well, but your organization is generating these. I'm going to change that name. Then I'm going to go up here to the line items. I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to go P O, and then I'll say LI. So POs, line items. Now we like the word line item in there. That's good. And then lose the 2, and then we change that. So these start to stick together here. And of course, they already have fields in them. Now I want to point out that while this conversation is about creating a module for purchase orders, the tools and techniques in this video are generic. And so you can apply these skills to any module that you might need to create for your organization. Now at this point, I want to go ahead and pull out our checklist. We haven't talked about this before, but at this point, I think it's useful to have a checklist. So item 1 is to, of course, determine what our business needs are. And of course, your business needs will decide what module you're going to either recycle or duplicate. Now, keep in mind that you pick the module to recycle or duplicate based upon overall similarity. For example, a PO is very similar to an estimate, which is very similar to an invoice. It's a document with multiple line items in the document. So all 3 of those are somewhat similar. And so technically you could take the invoice module and duplicate it and create POs out of that instead. And this will help cut down on the amount of work you have to do to customize it for your new module. So we've done the business case. We've determined what module we want to recycle. And then of course, item number 2 is, and I need to point this out, is that we need to confirm that we're not repurposing, but basically recycling. And even that's kind of a bad term. We're duplicating to make a new module. Repurposing would be to take estimates and rename it, or take projects and rename the projects. So it's not really creating anything, it's just renaming things. Now, if you can do that, that will save you tons of time. So renaming and repurposing is always much easier. However, duplicating it and building it is a whole lot easier than building it from scratch. That's really what we're trying to avoid here. Building it from scratch, we have to have deeper knowledge, more knowledge. It's harder to get where we're at without more concrete FileMaker Ninja type skills. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of cutting the corner for everyone here in the video, making it easier for you to get to where you need to be without trying to create things from scratch. So then the next step after that was to duplicate the tables. We did that in the previous video. So the next step is to dive into these duplicated tables, identify important fields, key fields, and rename them. So once again, I'm going to look for anything obvious that needs to be renamed, from estimates to POs, and also try to identify any key fields along the way. So what I've done is I duplicated the tables. Once I have the tables created, then renaming them is a snap. I'm going to go to the main PO table. And notice that there's a lot of reference to estimates here. And so what I need to do is go through the system and clean those out. So I got some fields down here that I want to obviously fix. So we have the date, PO, change that. And when we do that, it fixes all sorts of calculations up here where we saw in these calculations it was referencing that date field. So I'm scanning down here looking, charts, list active. I'm going to just put PO month right here for this for now. I'm going to change that. So that helps with that. Going down here, looking in the title of the fields that have anything to do. There's the barcode capabilities, some other things like that, some containers. Once again, I'm not looking to change structure or delete things at this point. I'm just trying to find things that are obviously estimates that should be changed to POs. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort by type of field, and I get all the calculations grouped together. And I'm just looking at how these are set up and what they're doing. Display project name, if there's a project or not a project, and all that might still be useful if you're issuing POs against a project. So these things in here, we can just leave them alone. If you have fields that you end up not using, as a general rule, they won't cause you a problem. In fact, empty fields within FileMaker take almost no space at all. In fact, effectively 0 space. And so if you actually have fields in here that you don't need and you're not sure whether to delete them or not, then just leave them. So estimated sort estimate month. I can click this one here. That seems to need to change. So here I have ID estimate. I'm going to make that ID PO. And I'm going to say change. And then, but here's the thing with serial numbers is that I tend to put the table identifier in that. So this still says estimate in it. So I would change this to POG. So we know that if we see a serial number and it says POG, we know that we're looking at a serial number from the PO table, which is kind of cool. So I think that's kind of the basic ones there. I'm going to jump down to the line items real quick. I'm going to see ID estimate once again. Now this is the foreign key for connecting the PO main table to the line items. I'm going to hit change. So once again, that does not have an auto enter because that's the foreign key. If you have questions about primary keys and foreign keys, check out this video right here. Then I'm going to jump over here to ID line item, and I'm going to say, well, line item's kind of generic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say PO line item. I'm going to hit change that. I'm going to hit options to take a look at it. It doesn't really have a identifier in it, so I'm just going to say POLI underscore. That's our identifier that we're using. The underscore here is a simple separator. You don't have to use it. I'm not even consistent in how I use it within my own organization. I can leave it like that. But frequently, what you don't want is a space, right? So years of doing development with more advanced technologies and stuff and like PHP and things like that, spaces are like felony no-nos. If there's any chance, it could be used as part of a string. So you'll see me use underscores a lot. You see them all over here because I don't want to run the risk of having to use a field in a URL and then the space is an illegal character. So, and even if you're not an advanced developer, which clearly that's an advanced conversation, by using underscores and not spaces in layout names and in field names and scripts and things like that, you know that those scripts and layouts and fields can be used successfully with PHP if you ever go down that road. So that's a little bit of preventative medicine there for you. So I'm going to hit OK there. I'm going to look for any other obvious fields here. And that's it. So we've completed the basic table construction and the basic field editing that we needed. So the next thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and dive into our relational structure or schema, find the estimates area, and duplicate that and repurpose that as well. Now I'm going to jump back in. I'm going to go to relationships. Now, remember how we could copy and paste previously with tables, and technically you could copy and paste fields and things like that? Well, this is another area, what we call schema. This is basically the under the hood structural stuff. These are these table occurrences. I can't really copy and paste one table occurrence from one file into another file. So there's no copy and pasting in and out of here. If you look here, there's no copy and paste. So there's no ability for me to go from one copy to starting point and bring over schema or this structural relationship stuff in any sort of automatic fashion. Now this, in my opinion, is a somewhat serious limitation with the FileMaker platform. I have communicated this issue to FileMaker Incorporated and the employees there. They are aware that this is a major issue. I'm not entirely sure how and when they plan on dealing with this issue, if ever, but they have been made aware of this limitation. In fact, if you don't let them know that they have issues in the product, then they may never fix things. So it's important for you as a developer, when you run into issues or things that don't make sense, you let FileMaker know that. You send them an email. and tell them that you have these issues. Even if you're wrong and you don't understand the product and you're afraid of making a complete fool of yourself, don't worry about it and submit your comments anyway. It's super important that you express your confusion to them, because if you are following along and using the product and you get confused, that means probably somewhere in the application something was too technical, right? And they will look at your comments and emails and go back and go, aha, that area needs to be refined or made more obvious or more clear. The same thing that goes on with my videos. I make a video, I get 4 or 5 emails from people saying, hey, we have no idea what you're talking about. Then I go back and I refine and improve the videos so they make as much sense as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the estimate section. Estimates and estimate line items are these sections right here. Basically what I need to do pretty much is duplicate these, because I don't know what I'm going to need, and it's better off just to duplicate these. Now let me see if I can actually duplicate these. I'm going to say that button right here is the duplicate button. It does it. It duplicates it. So you can duplicate schema within the system, but you cannot copy and paste and move the schema from outside the system. So that's really important. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to notate over here and take a look at where my numbering goes with the anchor buoy system. Once again, the anchor buoy videos are here. There's 2 of them, and I would recommend you watch them at this point if you haven't seen them. So I'm looking for my numbering that I should start using with the anchoring. The bottom one there is T27, so I'm going to assume that these are going to be, even though they're not in order here, that's okay for most things that we're doing. I'm going to say it's going to be T28. Now, this string right here would never be used in PHP anywhere, so you don't have to worry about spaces and things like that in there. Once again, you can still see I have an underscore because old habits die hard. Same for over here. Now, once again, this is like a post-it note that's in the relational diagram here in the schema, and the post-it notes are always behind any of the table occurrences or table occurrence groups. So I'm going to double click here. I'm going to say this is T29, and this is going to be POLI line items once again. And this is simply so I can identify and find these pretty quickly. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reconnect and cross-connect these. I'm going to do a couple so you can see what I'm doing, and then after that, we're just going to fast forward through here as quickly as we can. I'm going to rewire this to this table occurrence group right here, but I'm going to call it T28, so it knows it's the main TO, and I'm going to lose the 2 on the end because it's the first one. The name of these TOs very much could be used in a script, in a URL, or in PHP somewhere. Once again, I'm going to not use spaces anywhere. So there we go. It's got a good name there. We're going to come down and do the same thing down here. All right, so there we go. So we got that. Now I need to sequence my way and reconnect all this stuff. So I'm going to start at the top one. Now, first off, we're connecting estimates to accounts. Well, POs could be connected to an account, so that does make sense. So this side over here is attached to account. These 2 right here are going to be easy to fix. I'm just going to click right here. I'm going to say on this side, it's ID account to ID account. In fact, it's already fixed. It locked right on and fixed it. If I come back over here to contact, it locked right in already. So there was a little bit of automatic thoughtfulness that FileMaker did when I changed that table occurrence. It realized it was a duplicate, but it had the same name, so it locked on to the same name over here. That's pretty cool. There's a space and 2 over here on the title. Those should really be cleaned up. Once again. Okay, now notice right here, I was trying to delete this and say it's okay, but I would have had a duplicate title and it didn't let me do it. I didn't understand what I was doing here. So what I have to do is actually name it correctly. And the first part of this is it's not T08A, it's going to be T28A, right? And there we go. That one's good. And this one right here. In fact, I'm going to rename these right now for you at high speed. So let me just go ahead and do that. At this point, we've gone through our schema, renamed the anchor, which is on our left. We've renamed all the buoys. So that completes, at least at this moment, the duplication of the relational structure for our new PO generation module. It's important to point out that we're building this project with the assumption that we have a pretty good understanding of our business requirements. Now, this video is not really about discussing your business requirements because, frankly, every business is somewhat different. And the rules and regulations about how POs are issued and generated and managed, I could tell you from dealing with most businesses that, while conceptually the idea is the same, the execution of the PO generation and management frequently is very different from business to business. What I want to point out once again is that item number one was to work out our business processes. Because we haven't done that, and this is a generic video, then we're making a lot of assumptions here about what these TOs should be and what they are. Of course, there's certain TOs that are obvious that will be driving the line items of the PO, etc. However, these table occurrences, to a large degree, drive certain business logic within the solution. So we're not going to be able to really customize these table occurrences in this video because it's really specific to a business need. Given that we largely want to duplicate the estimates module and make it POs, we just duplicate all the table occurrences while we're at it. It's simpler to duplicate them up front and then remove them later if we find that we don't need them. So what we need to do now is make sure that all these relationships in here are good. And once we've done that, we can kind of step away and look at the layout perspective of this thing. So the goal is to get this thing to a functional layout where everything is kind of working. And then at that point, we can make some adjustments or customizations based upon the expected direction that your business team needs, right? So we'll do customizations based upon that. Now, I don't think this video will go quite that far because, once again, every business is different, but I want to get us a lot closer to the end goal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the relationships here. And what you're going to notice is that there is a little bit of logic in what FileMaker has done. You know, some areas you see gaping holes in what FileMaker has as a product. But then in other areas you see where they've made a lot of logical thought processes, some intelligent decision making that helps us out. And this is one of those areas. So what you're going to notice here, I'll start with the top one, is that even though we changed the TO over here on the anchor side from estimates to this copy of estimates, it just didn't reset itself. It went back to the old name. It saw that even in this new base table that we gave it, that our original name was there. So it uses that name, which is pretty cool. So you'll notice as you go down through here that these are in pretty good shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually look at these logically and go through them real quick. And I'll fast forward here if it gets stupid, but that looks pretty good. So that's accounts over here. And then we get over here to this third one here, which is IDPO to ID estimate. Now, IDPO to ID estimate, I don't care what planet you're from, that's going to be wrong. And what you realize over here is that this table occurrence group, while we renamed it, the third one down, this T28 Charlie, this is wrong because we can't be connected to estimates. It has to be connected to PO. So this is a self-relationship in this case. This gives us access to other POs in there, but through the filtering of a relationship. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to select POs generated, and I'm going to notice that's going to butcher the name. So what I'm going to do is before I change it, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to copy the name right here. And then I'm going to go over here to PO generated, and I'm going to notice it just blew it all up. So I'm going to paste in the old name right here. And then it's really POs to POs, right? POs to POs is really what the relationship is. This is the anchor side here. This is the buoy side here. And this is generally the key field name or some sort of indicator of what the key field is. In our case, it's going to be IDPO. So that would be the correct name. Notice before that when we did this in fast forward, we just kind of this bulk kind of idiot mode blow through. And that might be useful for you just to do that to get it off your plate. I like to do all the bulk non-thinking work in one pass. And I try not to mix it with high-end intellectual thinking because frankly, the high-end intellectual thought is at more of a premium with us because of the world of distractions we live in. So I try to separate that and segregate that. So over here, once again, we're connected to same thing. It's a self relationship. So I'm going to connect it to here again. It blew it up. In fact, once again, I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to look at the name. This is the actual name is what it should be. I'm going to go over here to PO generated. I'm going to paste in our new one here. We got PO to PO. Once again, I put PO or POS, POs. I'm splitting hairs. This is semantics. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to 28 D, PO, and G year. So I say, okay, on that. Then I go back and look at the fourth. And if I can't find the relationship for this, don't stress it. Just move it over here or somewhere where you can see the little white box and double click it. So we got G year to G year on that. It looks okay. So that's probably going to be functional. You can move it back over here. You don't have to have it exactly precise because there's some alignment functions down here that'll do that for us. In fact, I'll show it to you real quick. What I'm going to select. I'm going to hold down my command key on my Mac, the Clover key. I think it's a control key on Windows, whatever it is. It gives us this dark box. This is what everything that's fully contained within this dark box will be selected. Okay. And then what I do is I come over here to the alignment tool right here and I look for range, right? I look over the range tools right here. I click the left one. I say align left edges. And they all align to the left edge. Now they all shifted, moved around a little bit, but that's really secondary. What I want to do is make sure that they were all aligned together. So we got through that one. We get to T28 E here. And once again, this is another self relationship. Before I change it, I'm going to copy the name because FileMaker blows the previous name out, right? So I got POs to POs with ID status. I hit OK. I'm going to go to its relationship right here. ID constant to flag status. Okay. Real briefly, ID constant's always a 1. Flag status is probably a checkbox where the checkbox is a 1. So if you check it, it becomes a 1. I'm guessing. I don't know. But that's how we would kind of wire this up with bulk. Once again, we're going to straighten out some of the business processes and business rules once we kind of get this bulk fixes done. Once again, same thing here. This time I'm going to be smart enough to copy the name here, jump down here, paste it in, PO to POs right here. I can make those like that if I like. Month and year, that's interesting. So we'll go over here to this relationship right here. Month beginning, month beginning. I think that has to do with having them show up in certain sub-summaries in a list view, in a reporting for the list view. All right, so once again, another one here, self-relationship again. Copy, go down to POs, generated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically go through in high speed and straighten all this out, and we'll pick it up in a little bit. Now, what I'm going to do here real quick before I get too far ahead is I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, save all the changes. So they're committed and saved. So if something bad happens, I can always go back. I'm down to right here. All right, so I've done all the relationship fixes here and gone through and looked at it one more time. There's one that I left here that's an interesting problem to solve, and I wanted to save it for you instead of blowing through it like 900 miles an hour. So the one I want to look at is T28J as in Juliet, and it's a connection that was normally between invoices and estimates. And if you think about it, in a lot of businesses, there's going to be some sort of connection between invoices and estimates. I mean, it makes perfect sense that people will generate estimates and then they can spawn potentially one or more invoices from an estimate, especially if you're a very efficient business. You have one template or 5 templates or 20 templates of estimates, and you simply recycle those. I see that with a lot of people using Starting Point. Well, in this case, it's an interesting business situation because obviously PO to estimate doesn't work. And so the question is, do we want to connect a purchase order that's generated from invoices? So if we generate a PO, we are buying something, okay? We're sending it out to a vendor, we're issuing it, okay? Invoices where we're billing someone for services or equipment that we're selling. So in a lot of ways, POs generated and invoices are like opposite ends. So they're wouldn't necessarily be a relationship. However, for the sake of conversation right now, just for this next 60 seconds, let's say that we were making a POs that we receive from vendors. You could easily make the case that you're going to put an invoice together, you're going to package things on the invoice, and in order to complete the invoice, you may have to put orders together. So you might have a way or a need to connect POs to an invoice where it's going out the door. Once again, it totally depends upon your business process. In 26 years that I've been doing this, I've seen it where people would never do this, or people would do this, or in a lot of cases, they would connect a PO to a project or job. So we have this project or jobs module in Starting Point, and then that would generate invoices. And frankly, that makes a lot more sense in a lot of ways. But if you wanted to connect to invoices, what we have to do is we have to have a field over here to connect it. What is unique about this PO? Well, if you knew that you were always going to have a single PO attached to a single invoice, you could define a ID PO over here in the invoices side. So you could say fields, go to invoices, and you could define a foreign key. Once again, this is the non-auto entering key. It's a foreign key. There's a foreign key there. 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 They're all over the place. So I define another foreign key. So it allows us to attach a single PO to this. It's basically kind of like a one-to-one relationship in a lot of ways in this sort of situation right here. We say create. We hit OK. Oh, not OK. We go back to relationships. We go to our T28J. We double-click it, and we would connect it to ID PO. Change. There we go. Don't forget that. So making changes to the primary keys and foreign keys will be important to understand as part of the business process. And what's really critical to understand about the business process is nothing technical. It's not technical. It's you looking at your staff or the staff of your customer. I have no idea, but you're going to find yourself in a spot where you need to describe where the PO is generated and who generates it and who requests it. And if the person requested is the actual person who types it out, and then they type it out. And then that PO gets emailed, faxed, hand-delivered, printed to a vendor somewhere. And that results in a document coming back. And so the question is are you going to take into account that maybe not all the items are being delivered? And so, of course, that would be part of the process that you would go through with this PO construction process is, of course, first to duplicate something that already exists, if that will save you time. And then the second thing is to take that new PO system and add additional functionality that allows you to notate the quantities of the accepted items. So I know I'm off in the weeds a little bit here, but it's important that you're able to understand and fully articulate the business processes behind this purchase order system that you're building. And once again, in our example, it's a purchase order that we're duplicating from estimates. But you have to absolutely know, irregardless of any technology that you're using, say you just have pen and paper, how are POs being processed by this organization? What are the rules? How are they taken in? How are they approved? How are they generated? How are they sent out? Is there a QA process? All these things you need to know. And those business rules lead us back here to the relational diagram. And these TOs that we have here, these buoy TOs on the right, are created to help support those business processes. So at this point, we've duplicated the tables, we've adjusted the fields, we've adjusted or tweaked the schema or relational structure to meet the needs of a very generic PO generation system. So at this point, we've completed our schema changes. We've added our tables here. We've also gone through and done some gross adjustments to the fields, although more changes may be needed. Certainly, the relationship graph is as far as we can take it at this very moment. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and say OK, and I'm going to go ahead and take a look at our list of layouts here, and notice that as we created a new table, FileMaker automatically created for us a kind of default layout for that table. And of course, these are very underwhelming layouts, but that is the default for FileMaker. Now, the obvious play would be to go to the mouse layouts, go down to estimates, grab the data entry screen here, drop into layout mode, and then select duplicate layout. Now, what this does for us is that it creates a new copy down here at the bottom, and we can repurpose this to meet our specific needs. Of course, first what we have to do in here is go to Layout Setup and say that this now belongs not to the estimates data entry, but it belongs to the PO generation data entry or PO generation table. Now, as a reminder, we don't directly connect layouts to tables or base tables. We connect them to table occurrences. What we want to do is connect it to the anchor table occurrence. So that's what we want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and click here. I'm going to go down to the very last anchors that we have, and you'll see that we had T29 was PO line items, which is not this table. We're looking for T28 POs generated right here. So that is the anchor. So we're attaching the layout to the anchor. Once again, if you have questions about the technique here or what we're doing, check out our videos on Anchor Buoy. That's in our Pro video course. So I'm going to go ahead and rename the layout name. I'm going to give it a couple X's right here because I don't really know what the number is going to be at this point. I just want to kind of get it going. Once again, I'm using underscores on the outside chance that we actually use this somewhere down the way in a PHP page or URL somehow. Now the trick is that now we have to go through every field in the layout and fix it. I have to go to this field right here, double click it. Notice what it's going to be. It's going to be on the wrong table occurrence group. So we have to go up here to the top where we have the related section of table occurrences. And so I go to the very top and I say current table. And then of course, for whatever reason, it locks on to some other value. So I'm going to select project name right here, and that field is fixed. So we have to repeat this process everywhere we go. I notice right here, every once in a while, we go to the correct table occurrence group, and FileMaker, in the process of trying to guess what we want, is off. And I'm not sure why it's off or what we did to cause it to be off. Generally, this locks on to the correct name pretty well, but you have to keep an eye on it as you go through and do this. You can't totally mentally check out. Now, as you can see right here, we have some fields that may not be applicable to the PO for your particular business. In fact, a lot of these fields might not be applicable to your business. So just understand that as you get to fields that you don't need, feel free to remove them off screen or do what I do and remove them maybe off to the right side of the screen where you can easily add them back into the system later. Now we'll notice down here at the bottom left corner, we have our portal of line items. These line items work the same as they do in invoices and estimates, so there's no real magic here. Keep in mind that before I double click on this portal, I want to note down at the bottom left that we have a table occurrence of T08K as in kilo or kitty cat. And so we double click the portal and it says get related records from unknown. So I go down to T28K as opposed to T08K because the relationship should effectively be the same one. And of course, if I look here, I notice it does say T28K, PO, line items by ID PO. We can set it for that, which is great. I hit OK, and then we have to go through the fields that are in the portal. Now, as a general rule, all the fields that are in the portal will use the same relationship that drives the portal itself. So in this case, T28K. So I'm going to go ahead and specify T28K and then select the correct field. Same goes over here for these as well. Notice that FileMaker understands that we have changed the table occurrences, yet it's able to sufficiently guess or guesstimate what field we want to restore to, which is pretty cool. Now notice we have a couple merged fields randomly on screen, so I'm going to go through these and find these. We also have some buttons on screen where we want to double click and change the field. So by double clicking on an element on screen that happens to be a button, I don't get the field selection pop-up dialog. However, I can go to the inspector on the right, press the pencil button there on the very right, and change the field without worrying about changing the script. So that's a pretty cool technique as well. So at this point, we've completed the reassignment of the fields to the new table occurrences on the T28 table occurrence group. So the next thing to do is to check it, add a new record. Seems like things are working okay. A lot of these buttons here are not going to function properly because there was an expectation of certain scripts that are attached to these buttons. All those scripts need to be reviewed, maybe duplicate the scripts, and maybe adjust them to work correctly with this layout. Notice here we got an error message, so that's not so great. So one of the main things you're going to want to do is adjust the navigation across the top of the screen. Now, we keep all our main navigation scripts in this folder right here. And what I can do is I can duplicate an existing navigation script like the asset one right here. And after I duplicate it, I can rename it, give it the next number in the sequence, and let's call it go to purchase order. And then once we're in the actual script, we just have to change these two lines here. Line number 6, we change it to the correct layout. If we had a touch layout for the purchase order, at this point we don't, so we're going to send it to the same layout. So that's what we're doing. So we're going to adjust line 6 and line 14 to go to the correct layout. And then save the script, and then go ahead and close the script workspace here. Now notice that we can also be on the home screen here. We can duplicate one of the buttons or maybe use one of the buttons for a module that we're not planning on leveraging, right? So recycle a button like I'm doing here, or use an existing button and repurpose it, whatever you want to do. Notice that I've duplicated the button, I've retitled it, I left the icon off the button. I can, call this POs generated, maybe POs issued. I can select the script. It was set for timesheets, but I want to go down and select the new script that we just wired up. And so now if we go back to browse mode, I can press this button and bingo, we're on the new PO layout. Pretty cool. Now at the top of the screen, we need to add navigation. Now in this case, I don't want to really remove anything. Let's say, for example, that we want to just add this new button. So the best thing to do is to actually press the plus button right here. And then we're going to add a new button, which will be by default on the right side. And I say POs generated or issued. Once again, I guess it'd be helpful if I would standardize my terminology. And of course, if I'm really short on space, I can keep the name real short. Notice also that I can specify when I'm on this layout what the default button is, which is handy. And there we go. So now we've added the PO button at the top. And because we're using the button bar in the FileMaker platform, it automatically resizes. Very cool technology. I can go home, go back, go forth. So we've got general navigational control. So at this point, we would need to go through each of the additional buttons. Maybe the next thing would be to address the list view and go to the estimate list view and duplicate that layout and then reattach it to the correct table occurrence anchor and then reconnect the right fields to it. So once again, at this point, we have to step through and modify the elements on screen, the scripts on screen to support this new PO. But at a very basic level, we now have a functional PO module. We can click in the fields, we can type in the fields, and if we don't want to rewire all the scripts, then remove the buttons that have the scripts on them that might affect this. So remove the find the account or find the contact, remove those buttons. Alternatively, you go and find those scripts, you duplicate them, and you adjust them for this new PO layout. So in summary, I can display our entire checklist here. We had to, identify the business processes we had, go through the process of duplicating the tables, adjusting the field names, going to the relationship schema, duplicating the necessary schema to repurpose it, and then finally making the modifications to the layout. Now, as I mentioned early on in the video, this process that we just did here is the opposite process from what a normal user will do. A normal developer or power user will simply build the layout and start dragging, dropping things on there and moving things around, and that's how they will construct it. However, in this case, we knew from the outset that we wanted to recycle the estimates module. And because of that, we kind of built everything backwards, if that makes sense. So hopefully that gives you an idea how to duplicate a module in FM Starting Point, or maybe how to duplicate a module in some other database. Once again, understand that if you're using Anchor Buoy, that makes it real simple. If whoever built that database didn't use Anchor Buoy, then that might prove to be more of a challenge to find the necessary schema and to duplicate them and then adjust them appropriately. But that's kind of part of the process, why we build FM Starting Point the way we do. It keeps things simple for training and education. Just across the board, it's a very simple system to get your head wrapped around. I'm not going to lie and say there are not a lot of moving parts to it, but it's designed very specifically to make the education process as painless as possible. So if you have more questions about this process, feel free to dig into some of our other videos that detail other specific features or capabilities in the FileMaker platform. If you have additional questions about this, feel free to email us at support@rcconsulting, and I'll catch you next time.